faint hope this Wednesday night. The vast search zone in the North Atlantic where noises detected from the missing submersible.
The Canadian P3 detected underwater noises.
Questions about whether the vessel could handle such deep dives. And he was trapped in a sub for 4 days.
Keep on praying and don't exercise.
The man who survived history's deepest undersea rescue and got out with just 12 minutes of oxygen left. The investigation into a deadly chopper crash that killed 2 Canadian Air Force crew members. Plus, celebrating tradition and history on this National Indigenous Peoples Day.
We are a generation that is actually moving forward.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Those who are searching for the missing submersible in the North Atlantic say they have to have hope. But time is running out for the 5 people on board, including a father and son and the founder of the company that built the vehicle. The area of ocean searchers are covering is vast. It reaches depths of almost 4 kilometers. A Canadian military surveillance aircraft did detect some noises underneath the waves yesterday and again today. The search area has now been expanded. This Canadian Maritime Patrol aircraft is scanning the ocean, plus more rescue vessels have arrived. They cannot waste a minute. If it's still intact, it's believed only about a day's worth of oxygen is left for those on board. And the U.S. Coast Guard says they have no idea where it is.
Whether it's operable or whether it's sitting on the ocean floor, whether it's in the sea column, whether it's in the surface, it's all speculation, and we're just not in the business of speculation. We're in the business of searching, and we're putting everything we can with the data we have to search for the vessel.
Mike Armstrong is in St. John's, Newfoundland, the base for much of the search operation. Mike, what more do we know about those noises detected?
Yeah, well, Donna, there are 2 aircraft flying 14-hour shifts. They drop sonar buoys into the water and they listen. Well, both yesterday and today, they heard something.
We don't know what they are, to be frank with you.
The U.S. Coast Guard says experts are still analyzing what was heard. They are describing the sounds picked up by a Canadian P3 aircraft as underwater noises. Now, some have described those sounds as possibly banging. That is what the crew on board the sub would do if they were stuck trying to be found. But it could also be something else, animals or debris clanging. The Coast Guard will only say remotely operated vehicles have been deployed in the area where the sounds were heard, but have so far not found anything.
We hope that when we're able to get additional ROVs, which will be there in the morning, the intent will be to continue to search in those areas where the noises were detected, and if they're continuing to be detected, and then put additional ROVs down in the last known position where the search was originally taking place.
There are now 5 ships searching around the site of the Titanic wreck. The Canadian Coast Guard icebreaker, the Terry Fox, headed out from the St. John's Harbor this morning. 5 more ships are on their way, arriving in the next 24 to 48 hours. But the area they're searching is growing. Wind, waves, and currents mean the sub could have drifted. The search area is now the size of Lake Erie and about 4 kilometers deep.
We want them to come home. I want them to come home safely.
The company that owns the ship that launched the Titan spoke out for the first time Wednesday. The ship and its crew are still on site participating in the search.
This is an unprecedented situation, but I can assure you that they're handling their responsibilities very professionally and fully focused on trying to find the submersible and bring those people back safely.
You know, it's obviously very distressing.
Colin Taylor knows the missing sub. He went down in the Titan last summer to the Titanic wreck. Taylor also knows 2 of the missing men.
This is not a tourist operation.
The CEO of the company that runs the sub, Stockton Rush, and French maritime expert Paul-Henri Narjolet. Taylor says the sounds picked up underwater are finally some potentially positive news.
You know, knowing P.H. Narjolet is on there, ex-French Navy, I am sure he is there tapping away on those titanium domes, hoping that someone is listening.
Now, 2 of the missing men are from a wealthy Pakistani family. They are a father and son. When Taylor went down last summer, he also took his son along. He says they went through all the preparations and the training, but before they went down, he took his son aside and he asked if he was really ready, if he really wanted to go through with it. He was, and it went off without a hitch. But with a father and son now missing, it's been hard for Taylor not to think about that part of it. Sunday, by the way, launch day, was also Father's Day. There is, of course, also the horror to think about what those men could potentially be going through right now with their oxygen running out. At this point, they would only have about 10 to 20 hours left. Donna?
Okay, Mike Armstrong in St. John's, thanks. Here's some context. The Titan submersible is about the size of a minivan, and crews, as Mike said, are searching an area the size of Lake Erie for it. It is a needle in a haystack, and since the haystack is the Atlantic Ocean, sonar buoys, first used during the Second World War, could play a critical role. Eric Sorensen explains what they are.
If the submersible is to be found, it will almost certainly come with critical help from this: sonar buoys deployed from Canadian Forces Aurora aircraft. Sonar is decades-old technology, but still the standard for searching in deep, dark waters. And they picked up the banging noises that have given hope to searchers in the North Atlantic.
We will continue to double down and to figure out where the submersible is and how it can be brought to the surface.
The Aurora aircraft dropped the torpedo-shaped sonar buoys into the water. First, they detect sounds, so if there was a banging from the submersible, search teams can triangulate where it's coming from. But also, the buoys emit sonar pings, which can bounce off an object, so analysts again can determine where the return echo is coming from. It's not certain the noises are from the sub.
They're trying to put all the pieces together. The noises have been described as banging noises. There have been multiple reports of noises, and every one of those noises is being analyzed, tracked, looked for patterns, and reported upon.
That means eliminating other sources of noise, such as ships crossing the Atlantic, while still trying to find a tiny vessel.
It's super small, and if you're in the Titanic wreckage, there's all the other things there, so where's the sub and where's everything else? So that's super challenging.
With potentially a few hours of oxygen left, the banging noises have revived hope for the crew on the Titan.
It changes my thoughts incredibly. So now I have this giant burst of optimism.
But as a deep-sea veteran, David Gallo's optimism is tempered, knowing what the men on board are going through if they're still alive.
Everyone that's been to the sea, to the bottom of the sea in a submarine, has feared this and wondered what would happen if this happened. If you were trapped there and with air slowly running out, it would be just horrible. I don't like to think about it.
For the next several hours, what everyone is thinking about and hoping for is finding the Titan crew alive and well. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
A French vessel racing towards the search area is the only one carrying a remote-operated vehicle capable of going deep enough to reach the Titanic site. It's extremely risky, especially in a vehicle like the missing Titan. A former employee was reportedly fired after raising safety concerns about the submersible's hull during deep dives. And the New York Times obtained a 2018 letter from the Marine Technology Society calling the construction experimental and saying it could result in minor to catastrophic outcomes. A BC company leading the industry in the design of subsea autonomous vehicles shares those concerns. Neethu Garsha reports.
These are our control racks that we can actually move those out to service them.
Don Muth has been working in the submarine engineering industry for more than 40 years.
I started out as a mechanical designer here.
He says he has concerns about how the missing submersible, known as the Titan, was built.
There's obviously some concerns because this is not a standard construction submersible. Normally they'd be constructed out of either a high-strength steel or a titanium.
According to the Titan spec sheet on OceanGate's website, the pressure hull is made of carbon fiber and bonded with a titanium ring.
Carbon fiber has been known to catastrophically fail.
The Port Coquitlam, BC company Muth works at provided the control system for the French sub sent to help in the search effort. And they built a Canadian government sub also on standby to help.
The Canadian government one that we built for them is a 5,000 meter depth one, and Titanic's at less than 4,000 meters. This is an example of a more industrial grade one.
We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Some of the testing for the Titan was done in Everett, Washington in 2018. The same year, a letter obtained by the New York Times raised the alarm about potential safety concerns which could have consequences for everyone in the industry.
We just imagine ourselves out there. It's something that when we built man subs, we've always said, if it's not safe enough for our children to go on, it's not safe enough for us.
OceanGate says important components like the pressure vessel were solidly engineered alongside NASA, Boeing, and the University of Washington.
Everybody's gravely concerned. They really are. It tugs at your heart.
Muth says it's a small community in the submersible industry with big hopes for a positive outcome. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Port Coquitlam, BC.
A little later, we'll hear from one of the men who survived history's deepest underwater rescue with just 12 minutes of oxygen left. In other news, the Royal Canadian Air Force says it will not be grounding its fleet of Chinook helicopters after a fatal crash in Ontario. 2 crew members died when their helicopter went down near Garrison, Petawawa during a night training exercise. 2 others have minor injuries. As Mackenzie Gray reports, a full investigation is underway.
The calm waters near Petawawa, Ontario, returning to normal after a desperate search ended in despair.
I can confirm that the 2 missing Canadian Armed Forces members were found deceased by searchers yesterday.
The Canadian Armed Forces wouldn't say if they knew why a Chinook helicopter crashed into the Ottawa River during a training exercise early Tuesday morning, nor would they release the names or positions of the deceased.
By respect for the family, we're not going to discuss the status of the deceased, whether they were pilots or aircrew members.
But just hours after that press conference, the former defense minister and current international development minister, Harjit Sajjan, tweeted out it was 2 pilots who died.
I know from personal experience, having flown that aircraft, that the water egress from the front of that aircraft where the pilots sit is extremely problematic.
The speculation of who died bringing back painful memories for veteran Ralph Kendrick.
You never lose the thought that it could be you too. And that's happened a lot of times.
Kendrick is the president of the local Legion, a fixture in a town of less than 20,000 where nearly a third of the residents work on the base.
It could be one of the guys that sit down here with us socializing on Friday afternoon for a beer call. We don't know. So they're like I said, they're all family.
Despite the crash, the Air Force hasn't grounded the Chinooks.
If there's any indication of technical issues, that would typically cause a pause until there's enough information gathered to make some informed decision. But in this case, I think they had enough information to make a sound judgment on, continued flight operations.
The next step for the military, figure out how and why the crash happened. An investigation the defense minister wouldn't put a timeline on. Donna.
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Petawawa, Ontario. Thank you. In Manitoba, another woman, a passenger on that bus that crashed near Carberry, has died. That means the total number of dead is now 16. Health officials say 9 others are still in the hospital, 4 of them in critical condition. Last Thursday, a transport truck and a passenger bus collided. The bus was carrying 24 seniors on a day trip to a casino. A memorial is planned for tomorrow, and the victims' names are also expected to be released. This fiery crash on the 401 in Ontario last night left 2 people dead. Ontario Provincial Police say a fuel tanker hit the center median and rolled over, rupturing the tanks and sparking this huge fireball. 2 other vehicles got caught in the flames. Officers are asking anyone who saw the crash in Pickering or has dash cam footage to contact them. In BC, 2 people are dead after a plane crashed on the west coast of Vancouver Island. It happened Tuesday afternoon. The plane with 4 people on board was flying from Masset on Haida Gwaii to Tofino when it crashed at the head of the Tassis Inlet. 2 passengers were rescued. The extent of their injuries is not known, and the cause is under investigation. A time to connect with family and with their heritage. Coming up, the traditions being celebrated on National Indigenous Peoples Day. The House of Commons observed a moment of silence today to mark National Indigenous Peoples Day, which coincides with the summer solstice this year. It's a day of cultural significance for First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples, and ceremonies and events are being held across the country. Melissa Ridgen has more on the history behind the day.
We would start off the day with the pipe ceremonies and sunrise ceremonies. It helps us to understand our roles to the earth through those stories about the summer months and grandfather's son.
And it's really about a time of coming together. These centuries-old ceremonies held by many First Nations give appreciation to their relationship with the land.
The summer solstice is to honor the sun and all of the crops and plants. and life, it brings like reciprocity in how we're supposed to give offerings to Mother Earth and the elements that provide for us.
And mark the start of the busy season. So our summer festival kind of kicks off the powwow season, if you will. So this is a time where we will travel to different communities and share, different nations will share their culture and the way that they did things. While summer months are a time for movement and socializing, winter solstice in December marks the beginning of the slow season for introspection and precious time at home. When we talk about winter, it's about time of like storytelling. It's a time of learning and being with your family. Newcomers now share this land, and both women see value in sharing culture.
I think it's important to share our ceremonies and teachings because it gives an understanding of our relationship to the land. Our recent identity is all based around trauma, and that's how people view us. We are a generation that is actually moving forward, you know. A lot of us are turning back to reconnecting with our ceremonies, our ways of life.
And those with curiosity and good intentions are always welcome. I'm honestly really excited to be able to share part of my culture. With education comes, knowledge, and knowledge of each other is really what's going to be about fostering better relationships. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Ghost gun raids ahead, a nationwide investigation into 3D printed firearms. A massive emergency response in the heart of Paris today after an explosion left more than 20 people injured, including 4 who were in critical condition. The blast partially collapsed a building that housed a private design school. A search is underway to determine if anyone was inside at the time. A cause hasn't been determined, but witnesses reported a strong smell of gas before the explosion. 45 people have been arrested and more than 400 firearms seized in Canada-wide raids targeting makers of so-called ghost guns, weapons produced using 3D printers.
This is a major operation. It's a first of its kind. The results are outstanding. The practice put in place of a collaboration on this type of criminal phenomenon also now gives us the flexibility and the agility to do it again with much more rigor and agility.
Police say the investigation started last November thanks to intelligence from Canada Border Services. There were 64 raids in 8 provinces involving more than 20 police forces. 3D printed guns, printers, silencers, and ammunition are just some of the items seized. Those arrested range from 16 to 70 years old. Homicide investigators held an update today on the killing of a prominent leader within the Sikh community in Surrey, BC. He was shot on Sunday in the parking lot of the Gurdwara where he served as president.
I have no reason to say that the Sikh community is in any further danger at this point. This was a targeted incident where one person was the target.
Hardeep Singh Nijjar was found with multiple gunshot wounds inside a vehicle outside the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara. Police say the killing appears to be targeted. Nijjar's death has sent shockwaves through the community he served. Police say they're looking for 2 masked suspects who fled the scene on foot and are asking for witnesses to come forward. Holding on to hope next, how a man survived 84 hours trapped in a submersible. Those 5 people on board that missing submersible made a choice to get inside it, knowing how risky it was. They went to see the wreck of the Titanic, but plenty of other people actually work in submarines every day. 50 years ago, Roger Mallinson and a colleague were laying transatlantic phone cables from a Canadian-made sub when something went wrong. They were trapped for 84 hours. Redmond Shannon met the man whose story is still the deepest successful sub rescue in history.
We were working in severe conditions and things just started going wrong.
Roger Mallinson recalls the longest 84 hours of his life. In 1973, he and Roger Chapman were being lifted to the surface in their sub after a shift laying cables on the Atlantic seabed, when something went terribly wrong with the tow line.
We'd taken 4 minutes to come up. When we went down, it took us 26 seconds. And we hit bottom at 40 miles an hour. And we hit bottom at 1,575 feet down. and we hit like a major road crash.
It sparked a huge international rescue effort off the coast of Ireland. The two Rogers almost certain that they were doomed.
Keep on praying and don't waste, don't exercise, don't use muscles, because that all burns oxygen.
But fatefully on that mission, Mallinson secretly brought an extra oxygen tank, giving rescuers more time to scramble, with small submersibles flown in from Canada and the US. On day 4, after numerous failed attempts, teams eventually attached cables to the stricken Pisces 3.
And we went from being stern down to banging and crashing, and things were breaking, and they were lifting us by the back end.
Bruised and queasy on the surface, they had just 12 minutes of oxygen left before opening the hatch of their North Vancouver-made sub. Mallinson says its sturdy design helped keep them alive.
No computer silly bits on it. It was honest and straight, and it was very, very well made.
Chapman has since passed away. 5 decades on from the rescue, Mallinson's thoughts are now with the 5 men who descended in the Titan, understanding the depth of their plight, perhaps like no one else.
Let's hope they are safe.
Redmond Shannon, Global News, Troutbeck Bridge, England.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the harbour in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, where the missing Titan submersible departed from, and now the hub of international efforts to find it and the 5 people on board. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.